Okay, let's get started with our BOMA and Planning Commission workshop. We'll start with a call to order and a roll call. Alderman Allen is not here yet. Alderman Franks, not Alderman, Commissioner Franks here. Commissioner Harrison.
Present.
Chair Lindsay's here. Commissioner McLemore.
Present.
Commissioner Mann.
Present.
Commissioner Orr.
Present.
And Alderman Peterson.
Present.
Okay, and Alderman Berger.
Here.
Alderman McClendon. Alderman Speedy.
Here.
Alderman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Barnhill. Not yet. Alderman Blanton. Alderman Shore. And Mayor Moore.
Present.
Present. Okay, great. Okay, we have two items on the agenda for tonight. Start off with a notification. Accommodations have been made to ensure that the public is able to view the meeting. The public may view the workshop in the following ways. Watch the meeting on Franklin TV or on the City of Franklin website. You can watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts. You can attend in person in the boardroom. The public may also watch the meeting on the TV in the lobby. So item number one for tonight is a discussion of a revision to the Berry Farms Town Center Development Plan, which includes an increase of 406 residential units, a decrease of 83,699 square feet of commercial space, and the removal of 25.18 acres of land from the development plan limits. So I will turn it over to the applicant for a presentation.
Hi, my name is Adam Balish with Boyle Investment Company, and it's nice to see everybody again in person. To bear with me, getting my wits about me for a public meeting again instead of Zoom. So we'll get right into this and hopefully not take by any means the full 30 minutes and keep you guys rolling into your next agenda item. First, before we get going, I've got Katie Rudowski and Mary McGowan with Kimley Horn and Kaiser Vogren with me tonight, should there be any more technical questions that come up that I may not be able to field myself. So, Berry Farms Town Center, as you all may know, was originally approved in 2005. So the image on the screen now is basically the color rendering of the development plan that was approved dating back to 2005. Boyle is a long-term owner of our projects. Often will relook at these projects to understand kind of is what we originally designed, what is it that we originally looked at, is it still working, is it meeting the market, and have conditions changed or things that may not be appropriate anymore. And so in looking at that, we wanted to present a modification to the current development plan, keeping in mind that we're about 16 years in to what we thought was going to be about a 20-year project. So really what we're trying to do is, for all practical purposes, wrap a bow up around this project and hopefully finish strong over the next 5 years. So this is an image, and we'll get more into detail here in a moment, but that shows kind of some of our proposed revisions. Is there a pointer on this button? Chance, the red button? I don't know if everybody can see this or not, or point to the back one.
Do that one back there if you would, Adam.
So there were some changes that have been made over time that have not quite been articulated in the development plan. So some of those are in this lower left area near where Tito's is, you may be familiar with. Originally on the last slide, we had a row of buildings here and a row of buildings here with a sea of parking in between. And what you'll see now is what is built, but is more of this kind of pedestrian-oriented village that we have there today. And then in this area here that we're looking at changing, and this area here are areas that were predominantly big box retail and parking lot. And so we'll get more into that in detail in a moment. And then the last area that we'll talk about changing tonight is this area here that was about 25 acres that we were asking to be removed from the PUD. When we go back a slide, to this, you can see what was originally proposed in that area. And we kind of had the flyover was contemplated and penciled in, and then there was an office building. But the majority of all of this is floodplain in between. And so those two areas really aren't very well connected back to the PUD and the main project. And then the areas that you'll see that we'll talk about in more detail are the areas of this parking lot here and what we would call big box retail, and then this large sea of parking and office building in blue in this zone. One other change that is being made as you get into the technical components of the what would be the ordinance, and Amy can help describe this to me if I misspeak, but originally hotels were part of the approved use, but were not accounted for from a entitlement standpoint. So there weren't a certain number of keys or rooms in our entitlements. So currently there are, I think, 235 hotel rooms that have been built amongst the 3 hotels. There is a Hampton Inn here, Holiday Inn Express here, and a Residence Inn here. Those are all existing hotel rooms that in this ordinance you will see an add of 235 rooms. We are not asking to add hotel rooms to the plan. This is just catching back up from a takedown table, if you will, to reflect what's currently built. So this, again, is kind of a highlight of the red area that we are focusing in on for changing. I guess I should have come to this slide a second ago. And then kind of a blow-up of those areas. So again, as I mentioned earlier, Boyle is constantly looking at how these plans may evolve over time. And in this particular case, we saw a sea of big box retail and surface parking on the south side of the site. And in the area to the east of the site was a large sea of parking and corporate office. As we all know, since 2005, when this was originally approved, our shopping patterns have changed. The big box retailers that this was envisioned for and more of a regional retail destination aren't really what is driving the commerce for retail today and is not something that, given the design patterns and the current build out of Berry Farms Town Center, that we think is appropriate anymore for this location. In addition to the area near the office buildings, when this was originally envisioned in 2005, the economics did not work to contemplate structured parking. So you will see a large sea of parking in a lot of our original master plan. And what we are showing today is backfilling some of those seas of parking with 3 main parking decks, and then introducing more mixed-use development around that. So what we are asking for in this revision is an additional 406 multifamily residential units. And to be really clear up front, when we say multifamily, that is per the definition of the zoning ordinance, so more than 4 units of attached housing. That's not me saying, hey, I want a 406 unit apartment complex. These are spread out amongst all of the orange buildings and brown buildings that you see on the plan here in front of you, and is hopefully in keeping with already the development pattern that we currently have at Berry Farms. So Berry Farms today consists of 671 residential units at Berry Farms Town Center. Of those 671, there are approximately 340 that have been sold in either a single-family home or a townhome or condo type ownership. There are currently 331 apartments that are under construction and will begin to be delivered this fall. And so what we are requesting is an additional 406 multifamily units that at this point we're not making a commitment and letting kind of the market speak to what would be the ownership type, whether that be for sale or for rent. There is also the revision to the PUD with the hotel rooms that I mentioned a minute ago, and then the deletion of the space in the far northeastern part of the PUD near the interstate. Through all of those changes, we are actually also requesting a reduction of approximately 82,000 square feet of commercial through this overall process. So just to give everybody, would you mind hitting that link? So just to give everybody an update of where Berry Farms currently stands. If you haven't been by to visit, this is a brief drone video where we have inserted not only the existing buildings, but modeled in the buildings that are being proposed. So this will just take a second. These are the statistics that are there currently, just to clarify that. This office building was opened this spring, and so this video is a couple months out of date. All of this flyover is what exists today, and the development pattern that we're hoping to continue, and we'll show some more photos of that here momentarily. So sorry, we don't have that catchy tune anymore. So once again, here are just some of the images of what's under construction today, including the amenity package that is a standalone amenity package for the apartment complex that's under construction. They will not, the renters will not be utilizing the two pools that the current HOA utilizes, if that makes sense. And then one of the other byproducts of this change to the plan that we're hoping to accomplish is the creation of a few more outdoor living spaces and green spaces. Currently, the green spaces that we have at Berry Farms Town Center are more passive. If you're familiar with an area that has a silo in it near Publix and kind of Witt's Ice Cream, that area is pretty, more or less just a grass field. Compare that to the upper left image, which is McEwen North Side, and a project where we've recently integrated some retail into the park space along with this fountain and begin to kind of liven up the open spaces a little bit. And so these are some images that show some ideas of some areas that we would like to build upon. This is not suggesting that we're going to come in and plop down Airstream trailers to use 100% all the time. As Amy's pointed out to me, we obviously have to comply with all of the zoning ordinance and codes and things of that nature. But from a character standpoint, we're hoping to further activate these green spaces into zones like you see on these photos. We would also continue to expand the Greenways Trail program. So the trails that are in green on the map today are existing, and this completion of this area would allow us to connect in the blue and the red to tie back into the existing trails. We would also, although it's not shown here, as part of the Chadwell project, that project proposes to connect along 5 Mile Creek underneath Goose Creek Bypass so that we can continue the trail system through Chadwell down to Stream Valley and further connect the residents in these areas. This these next couple slides show a little bit better graphically as to the area that we're proposing to change. It's highlighted in red. Everything that is not masked over in red is either existing or under construction today. As part of this project, we are also proposing a slight modification to the placement and the layout of some of the office buildings. So the office buildings that exist at Berry Farms Town Center today are in the zone primarily off to the far eastern side and are fairly monolithic, large corporate office buildings. What we're hoping to do with this revision is to pull some of the office into the mixed-use area, into these floor plates that you see here and here, as well as here, and try to begin to break down that massing of those buildings. This is spoken to in your new zoning ordinance updates, but instead of one large 240-foot wide building, you'll see, for instance, the building in the upper left on the screen now. That is a 5-story, 125,000 square foot office building that is broken down from a massing standpoint to appear as if it's two separate buildings. So we're hoping to work with staff to make sure that we're in compliance with the zoning ordinance and kind of bringing these type of buildings forward so that it's kind of more in keeping with the pedestrian-oriented environment compared to the kind of tertiary side of the development that's more vehicular-oriented. This slide begins to show some of the mixed-use development that we have already there on site, as well as some of the ideas of what it could look like moving forward. So the images here in the lower left, here in the lower right, and here in the upper right are all existing projects at Berry Farms Town Center today. And the buildings here and here kind of indicate some of the size and massing of the type of buildings that we would hope to introduce into this remaining plan. So introducing buildings that continue to have retail and commercial on the ground level and look at options for residential above. As part of this change, I've mentioned the reduction in commercial, and not only the reduction in commercial, but a switch in some of the uses. So through time, we've seen Berry Farms develop out with a little bit more predominant office use compared to retail. So the upper portion of the slide that says approved are the statistics that were approved back in 2005. So with that, we had the 143 single-family dwelling units, 528 multifamily, almost 550,000 of office, and 585,000 of retail. So this is what is approved today at Berry Farms Town Center. The table on the bottom is the revision to what we are proposing. And through those calculations, it's a reduction of almost 2,000 cars per day in the daily trips. You'll see the biggest change in that reduction is in this commercial space where we are deleting almost 250,000 feet of retail. So that's almost the equivalent of Thoroughbred Center at the intersection of Mallory and Cool Springs, to put that into comparison from the amount of trips and the number of cars that you would see with that reduction in retail space. You'll notice, as I mentioned a minute ago, the increase in office. So we've gone from about 550,000 to almost 720. And then all of this is accommodating a 2,000 car decrease with the additional 400 residential units. These last images, I'll flip to this slide first. These last images are for the area of what we call Section 10, which is the far eastern side of the site, and show a couple of examples of how this could build out if this development plan is approved. So the white buildings that are here today, 2 Town Center, which is an existing office building, is on the roundabout and is the larger building on the lower left of the screen. Residence Inn is here. These are for sale residential units here and here. This is Lee Company's office building here and 1 Town Center. So in these examples, what we were showing is how we are able to spread these residential units into a mixture of mixed-use buildings. And then this rendering better depicts that, where we have side-by-side residential, office, and then in this particular case, a pretty neat example of a use that we would like to introduce to the project, which is kind of an outdoor food court, food hall concept. And you'll see some photographs on the bottom of the screen that are kind of indicative of that use. And we would obviously work very closely with staff to make sure that a use like this would comply with all of the various requirements. With this modification, or with the development plan modification, we are not asking for any modifications of standards or any changes to Envision Franklin. So I think with that, that kind of concludes our formal presentation. I'd love to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, thanks. Are there staff comments?
Oh, one, if I may, Roger, one point of addition here. We have had 2 public meetings with not only the Berry Farms neighborhood and an in-person meeting, but also the required Zoom meeting that I think some of you all were able to dial into or have since listened to in person. Through that process, we heard several great ideas about things that we can improve upon within the development. And I want to point out 2 of those things really quickly because we forwarded those public concerns to staff as well as to Alderman Speedy because I think he had gotten some communication on it as well. One of those is that this currently is a road called Village Plains, and it stops right behind McDonald's, but has always been proposed to cross the creek and go into the center area. It's currently not built. So the commitment that we would make as part of this revision is to build that bridge and construct that road as a construction entrance into the remaining land before anything is built vertical, so that there's not existing or not construction traffic loading up on Berry Farms Crossing or Captain Freeman, the large collector roads, type roads on the left and right of the project. The other concern that has come up is a kind of lack of stacking and a bit of congestion that appears at Captain Freeman at Goose Creek Bypass. So that is in this intersection here. And what we are seeing, not only in our own projects, but throughout the city is kind of a new rush hour, if you will. No longer are we seeing the morning rush hour at 8 and the afternoon rush hour at 5, but we've kind of seen this new COVID rush hour pop up in the middle of the afternoon where folks that are working from home may be running errands, or when school was in session, when those folks were getting out and continuing to run errands. And so we've seen a bit of stacking occur at that location. And so we've already worked with our consultants to look at widening and extending those turn lanes rather, and providing more capacity at that intersection. So when this plan is resubmitted, it's not in the current submittal package that's in front of staff. When that plan is resubmitted, we would look to modify that roadway as well to make sure that it's further accommodating those turning movements. So, sorry about that.
Great, thank you. Any staff comments?
Nothing more to add at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to Planning Commission and BOMA comments. Commissioner Allen?
My question, was this presentation supposed to be in our? It's not.
It's not.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure it wasn't just me, because when I got here, I tried to tell it again. Oh, okay, that was my question, because there was a lot of information here and I couldn't see. As you guys were seeing, maybe I just need glasses. Okay, thank you.
Are you saying that some people have the presentation?
I was just making sure it wasn't me. Okay, no, that was my question.
There wasn't any attachments.
Okay, that was my question. Was it not submitted on time? It was, okay.
Okay.
I just thought maybe I needed an update. Okay, I will reach out. Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Franks?
Oh, Adam, that's a great job. Can you go back to that chart that had the count, the proposed count? So, the way I see it, your office is increasing on the proposed?
The office is increasing in the proposed, resident or retail is decreasing. Collectively, from a commercial entitlements, your zoning ordinance has changed compared to when we were entitled in '05. Originally, you contemplated entitlements by office and retail, and now it's just collectively commercial. So we are proposing a reduction of, I believe, 82,000 feet. Is that right, Katie? Do you know? So almost 83,000 foot reduction in overall commercial space compared to what was originally approved when you add up those two totals together.
And that reduced that traffic count significantly.
Well, predominantly, I think the majority of and you can see originally we had 22,000 cars a day in retail. That's dropped to 12,000 cars per day now. Even though there's been a slight uptick in the office and a slight uptick in the multifamily, or just the residential as a whole, that's more than offset by the reduction in retail.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Harrison?
Overall, I think it's a really good plan, just your ability to adjust with the market, the way that it's changed over the last 15 years. I think you're doing a really good job, and like to see it go forward.
Good, okay. And I got a couple of questions. The decrease of 83,000 is collectively the drop in retail in conjunction with the increase in office nets to 83? Is that what you're?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the other question is you indicate 406 residential units. Now, how do you define a unit? Is a unit a 4-unit multifamily unit?
I may need to defer to staff on that, but I believe the zoning ordinance definition is any attached product of 4 units or more are classified as a multifamily unit. That's not broken down in like a bedroom count. That's just a unit, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so 406 residential units could be as many as 1,600? Okay. Counting all the 4?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to confuse with the 4 attached. So if there are,
It's 406 units distributed throughout all
Yeah.
the buildings.
It could be 100 4-unit buildings,
One
okay.
could have 40, but throughout all of them.
well, I
Okay,
think one could have 5 would be the lowest number that you could have and still comply with the multifamily definition.
okay, all right. Those are my questions. Commissioner McLemore?
You said you currently have over 300 under construction now?
We have currently 331 multifamily units under construction that will be part of a rental project. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so totaling about 700 units, over 700.
Just to clarify that, of the 671 units that we have today at Berry Farms, 331 are multifamily that are part of a rental, would be part of a rental project.
Okay,
Of the remaining 340 units that were sold, approximately 174 units are multifamily, so either condos or townhomes, and approximately 166, if I'm doing the math right, Ms. Peterson, you may want to check my math, those would be single-family homes. So of the existing ratio of homes at Berry Farms, only about 25% of those residences are single-family homes.
okay.
So when we are saying multifamily, again, we're not proposing an apartment complex of 400 units. We are looking as a unit type that we hope to continue to build out and kind of spread out amongst the community in various for-sale projects. And yes, there would probably be some for-rent projects, but it's not,
It's not all one.
we're not coming in with a project similar to what you maybe see going up on Carruthers now that's just a rental project. This is a unit type that's kind of spread throughout the mixed-use component, and one that we think is already in keeping with the mixture that's at Berry Farms today.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Mann?
Yeah, no, I like the revised plans. I completely agree with the removal of the big box retailers. Obviously, 15 years has changed that. Having a grocery anchored center, and then being able to consolidate those open parking into parking garages, I think is a really nice feature. I also agreed and liked the part with the office buildings, having a little bit of different architecture than just the big massing with the glass windows. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good revision.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Orr?
You mentioned removing some acreage from the PUD, is that right?
Yes,
Do you mind just running through that real quick? And if you're taking it out, is there a future plan to develop that, or will it?
So as part of this request, and I may need a little bit of technical assistance making sure I speak to this correctly, we are asking for it to be removed from the PUD. We are asking it to then go to straight RC6 zoning and to match what the Envision Franklin plan calls for this area. So because of the disconnection between it and the PUD, and coupled with the floodplain that's grown in that area since '05, and then now this flyover that's been funded, the expenses to maintain this area as part of the POA, we felt like were maybe not quite the burden that we wanted to put on everything that's west of the creek. So this area east of the creek, given the profile of how things may develop in the future along Old Paytonsville Road from the MAPCO through the old Goose Creek Inn and on north to us, we felt like the RC6 and the Envision Franklin were were a better guideline to shape the development along the interstate than what our PUD was. And so that's why we're asking for the removal of that acreage. But just to be clear, we're not submitting a development plan or anything for that. It would just be straight zoned under the RC6 zoning definition.
Okay. Alderman Peterson?
A lot of things to think about here. And let me tell you, some of us did not get the information about the meeting that was the Zoom meeting, because I kind of joined that halfway through because I hadn't, it just was, I just happened to be looking at the calendar and saw that it was that day. So, I think you said that some people had looked at it later, so maybe we could get the, connection to that.
We had probably,
But I tried to see where that.
Video, the recording of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But I tried to look to see where the videos of the neighborhood meetings are, and for some reason couldn't quite.
there was, for some reason, a glitch, and we were made aware of that from residents and others as
Okay.
well. And I think staff jumped on that very quickly once they learned of that error on the website, and I think have since repaired that. So-
Oh, that would be helpful. That would be helpful, because they were talking about a number of different things and everything. And getting our look at this would be helpful
Sure.
too, although some of the same things were kind of covered,
Yes, ma'am.
through the other.
And my comments about the road connections and the bridge that we would commit for construction entrance, those concerns came up after we submitted this presentation, so we didn't modify the slides.
Okay.
After, we had a public meeting last Thursday night for 3 hours and really had some great cooperative interaction with the residents. And so those were some things that came from that we're willing to commit to based on their concerns, but we did not ask to modify this presentation to reflect that since it had already been submitted. So even though you guys didn't get it, I realize so.
So a lot of interesting things to look at there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Berger?
I don't have any comments, except, Adam, I would just encourage more for sale versus for rent.
Sure.
And also, if any of those buildings are built for rent units, that they would be less in scale, mass and size, and intensity.
One thing to piggyback off that comment, Alderman Berger, is that one of the other comments that came up from several of the public meetings was concern that 400 units, whether they're for rent or for sale, may be a burden on the current amenities, the pools and things of that nature of the existing
And you were
neighborhood.
saying,
And there is a slide here that is not overly detailed, but just calls out amenity kind of generically in several areas. You'll see amenity called out in 3 or 4 or 5 different zones. We are proposing to build 2 or 3 new pools and new amenities for these new 400 units. They would not partake in any of the existing pools of the existing residences. So although the trails and things like that would be open to everyone, the pools would not be. So want to make sure that was understood. Sorry.
Okay. Alderman McClendon? Nope. Alderman Speedy.
Yeah, I think Adam's answered all my questions. I think that after the two neighborhood meetings, the traffic concern, like anytime residents hear additional residential units, they, you know, he's shown clearly that there's 2,000 less trips with the removal of the retail big box, and then he just addressed the amenities and I think some of the stacking on Captain Freeman, the road past McDonald's, so I think those were probably some productive neighborhood meetings.
Okay. Alderman Martin.
Well, Adam, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but if your goal is to have this project look like downtown Nashville, you have succeeded. You know, what can I say? It's planned, the only difference is you're planning the whole thing instead of a street at a time. So, you know, my hat's off to you. But if that's your goal, you've succeeded.
I don't know if that was a compliment or a dig, but I appreciate your feedback, Ms. Martin.
I don't either.
Okay.
Okay. Alderman Barnhill. Alderman Blanton. Alderman Shore. Mayor Moore.
Well, thanks for the presentation. We were at a huge disadvantage not having it because, you know, I can't follow your pointer. You know, I did glean some things out of it, though, and I think most of the questions that I was going to ask have already been answered, such as the 25 acres you took out and also clarification on the 406 units, what that really means in the future. I do like some of the different architecture that you're offering. I think that creates a better look for live and work and whatever we're trying to do there. One comment you made that got my attention was you said that the floodplain had grown. Did I miss?
No, you did not mishear that. So in 2005, when this project was originally approved, the FEMA maps were updated shortly after the development plan was approved. The area in the northeast portion of the site that is grayed out near the Long Lane overpass, kind of flyover, the floodplain in that area grew from the original 2005 plan. We have since done a clomer and lomer to make sure that the floodplain did not encroach any within the built areas west of that, but this area had been encroached upon compared to the original 2005 plan. I believe that's now all caught up within the, like the FFO maps and things of that nature, and that's accurate. But if you were to go back and look at the 05 plan that was entitled as part of the PUD, that is, that area changed slightly with additional floodplain.
So really it didn't grow, the FEMA map changed? Or
I think that's probably a fairly accurate.
Did Berry
Yeah.
Farms have an influence on growing that?
No, we had not turned a shovel yet when that map changed, sir. So.
Okay, but what about the map that's coming out right now?
I don't believe there were changes here. That was mainly along the Harpeth where most of those changes occur, but they should be out almost any day now. But the public comment period has ended, so they should be adopted before the end of the year.
And you know, I said we should have known about that, and nobody ever told us that the maps were, I mean, not that we would have had comments, but I'm just saying. But since 2005, we've also had like, was it 2016 or?
So 2006 and 2016 were the two
Already.
updates, and now this one, which is technically dated 2019, but will be adopted soon.
Thank you.
Well, to finish up my comments, if I might, I like what you're showing as best I can tell from the limited availability, so I look forward to some more details in the future.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
The next item is a presentation by Aaron Rogie of CDM Smith on high-intensity and high-volume rainfall events in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, real quick, Aaron, if I may. First of all, appreciate Aaron doing this for us this evening. Aaron gave this presentation at the Tennessee Stormwater Association. I think it was a 45-minute version. We will not be doing that version tonight.
Almost an hour, yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying to get you the real highlights here tonight. So.
But it's important for us to recognize when changes are occurring in our weather patterns, and some of you probably have heard about some flooding that's occurred in the city, and Aaron came to us and did a good presentation, so I thought it'd be worthwhile for you all to hear it tonight. Thank you.
Great.
Absolutely. Honored to be here, and Mayor, I could not think of a better segue than how the last presentation just wrapped up there. So this presentation is called Once in a Lifetime, Twice in a Decade, Understanding Extreme Rainfall Events. So that's a little about me. That's from the Zoom, because I've done this. This is the first time I've done it live, so I have the luxury of meeting you in person, but I work for CDM Smith. They call me a project technical leader. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Florida and in Tennessee, and I'm also the Tennessee Stormwater Association Communications Chair. So we put out public information to folks like yourselves. Some of it's very technical on the engineering side, some of it meant for children even. So we coordinate all that sort of stuff to understand a little bit more about stormwater. So I'm going to start where I end. I'm going to give you the takeaways because I promise you as I talk about philosophy and I talk about algebra and all these things you're going to be mad at me about, that I have a point in telling you all of these things because it's very important because billions of dollars and lives matter on these little boring decisions that we make every single day. So the first one is our context for flooding is often only as bad as the most recent flood. That's really why I'm standing here in front of you tonight. Another one is weather is not random, it's chaotic. We kind of know that, right? There's a lot of trees falling in a lot of forests. That's common knowledge. Joni Mitchell gave me that one. They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Now it floods all the time. And of course, the last one here that we're building towards citizens, and really everybody, we're all citizens, right? Everybody should understand that they are subject to a monetary risk calculation being made by everybody. And that's all right. We have to do it. We all have insurance on our cars. We all think about the risk for things in everything that we do every single day. Stormwater flooding is really no different. So this is an interesting way to begin, but this phrase from 20 years ago always pops into my head. When I was in high school, they brought in this motivational speaker, and he was kind of this stand-up comedian style guy, really well-dressed, Steve Harvey kind of dude, and he comes out there and the very first thing he says is, "What is time?" And, you know, it's a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds. Nobody says anything, right? But the smartest kid I ever met, the only kid I ever met that got a 1600 on his SAT, he stood up and he said, "Time is man's attempt to quantize the motion of the universe." And it was as quiet then as it is right now. Nobody knew what to say about it, but the rest of us were, yeah, that's right. And that's what we're all trying to do as scientists, engineers, planners. We're trying to take something that's very chaotic and crazy and say, give me the 2-minute, give me the single-digit number about what is going on out there. So, because what we're not very good at as human beings is remembering what happened a long time ago and contextualizing it to current day. So if you lived in Houston, you probably would never imagine seeing that one on the right there during Hurricane Harvey, right? If it hasn't flooded in the past 10 years at all, you've heard the final closing argument from a lawyer. It's called recency bias. You know, our context for flooding is only as bad as what we've just seen or not seen. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about some terminology that's very confusing. I don't know that I really fully understand it either. A 100-year storm. So there's a 50-year storm, a 100-year storm. Sometimes you hear about a 1,000-year storm. What that is a probability calculation. It is a rainfall event that has 1% probability of happening in any given year. It's really kind of a coin flip. Technically, it's being equaled or exceeded, and it's only about rainfall. It has nothing to do with what happens after that rainfall hits the ground. It's just the storm itself. And interestingly enough, this Wasserstein here, this is in Cologne, Germany, where they just probably had another one to put on that wall last week. So here's the big scary stuff, right? This is what we build all...
I love it.
Thank you. This is what we build everything. Billions of dollars hinge on this extremely boring, awful-looking thing. And what happens here on this blue curve, this right about there is where casinos start making money. So you think if you flip a coin every single day, eventually after 9 or 10 heads, you know, what are you going to walk in? Are you going to go put it on heads or tails, right? We got to break this streak, right? It doesn't particularly matter. In 100 years, you may not get a 100-year storm. In fact, there's a 36% chance that you won't. It's counterintuitive. We as humans are not built to understand this style thing. It's a random coin flip. However, weather is not really random. You know, we know enough about it where we can say it's probably going to rain in a few days. There's a hurricane in the Atlantic. Everything that happens right this moment leads to the next, leads to the next. It's called a deterministic system. So it's only true-ish that coin flip really happens every day and that it's not predictable. And also the most important thing to learn about rainfall is that if you get back-to-back events, I mean, this is common knowledge, that's where your trouble is. In the engineering world, we use very complicated terms like antecedent moisture conditions, meaning it's wet outside, and tailwater, meaning the HARPF is really high. So when those two conditions come together, you can get a very, very serious storm. And the kind of handbook that we as engineers use is called an IDF curve. It's the intensity of a storm in its pure time-oriented phrases and how long it goes on. So this is even uglier. This is the battleship map that engineers use to try to pick one of these two to try to design our systems to, right? So each one of these boxes is an amount of rainfall that could happen in a period of time. So if you're up here, an inch of rain in 30 minutes, no big deal. That's great for the garden. An inch of rain in 15 minutes, that only happens about every 5 years. An inch of rain in 10 minutes, that's a 25-year storm. An inch of rain in 5 minutes, not physically possible according to this chart. So what I've put together here is some information from a rain gauge near Whites Creek, just north of Nashville. It was the wettest February on record there. So it was kind of an interesting take because at no point in the entire month of that February, it was the wettest February on record, did more than 1.5 inches of rainfall in an hour. Not very much, but it rained continuously. It rained all the time, up to the point where the 6-hour storm there, 5.41 inches in 6 hours, that's a 200-year storm. Never been seen before. Probably guaranteed to not be seen within our lifetime, one would think, right? So we have to choose, as engineers and planners, which one of these boxes we're going to shoot for to try to supply a level of service for flooding in our communities. The most popular ones are a 10-year storm, peak 1 hour, so it rains really hard for an hour, or the 24-hour rains a lot in a day. We have to choose something. So going back and thinking about the fact that there could be these return events on time scale all the way up from an hour, all the way up to 3 days, I looked at the BNA Nashville rainfall, which is kind of the very consistent hourly rainfall recordings for the past, what is that, at least 70 years. And this is kind of what you'd expect, right? You think, okay, there's maybe a 5-year storm, then a 10 years, a couple big ones in there, right? That's what our human brain is quantizing the universe into. It's what you'd expect. But then, realistically, this is what it looks like. These are all of the large storm events that happened at the Nashville airport in the past 70 or so years. You see there's a big cluster in the late 1970s. But right before that, didn't get anything in 10 full years. They probably didn't have any presentations accounts about rainfall in 1972. Nobody was talking about it. But of course, that's not even the full context because the 2010 storm was so big, it dwarfed everything else. So our context now is a little different for what rainfall could be. And you're thinking, oh, Aaron, you just told us. You just told us on the previous slide that February of 2019 was the wettest February on record, right? Well, that was at Whites Creek. This is at the Nashville airport, maybe 10 miles away. If you take away nothing else, take away that rainfall is extremely spatially variable. If a tree falls in the forest, are we hearing it, right? So if it doesn't hit the Nashville airport, it doesn't happen. That's not true. Here's the March storm event at several rain gauges around Franklin. So if you lived over, northeast towards Brentwood, you got about a 10-year storm. If you were over at New Columbia State or downtown, 6.5 inches, 10 to 25-year storm. Lived up by Fieldstone Park, 25-year storm, saw a lot more rain. But if you lived at West Haven, you saw 9.25 inches of rain. That's a 200-year storm, off the charts. Didn't really think that was going to happen in your lifetime, but it did. So, all right, what are the implications of all this? Well, I want to show you one last thing. So we do have some very highly detailed things. Like NOAAclimate.gov does actually put out these very detailed precipitation maps that show us generally where the precipitation is more intense. But you can see they peak out at 8 inches, and we know for a fact that 9.25 fell at West Haven. So we're trying our best to quantize the motion of the universe. But all right, you get it? It rains a lot, and we're just doing our best to try to figure out when and where it's going to happen. What do we do about it, right? There's a recent article that I read from researchers from Carnegie Mellon and the University of Wisconsin that admit that numerous studies show that heavy rainfall in the U.S. is becoming more common and more severe. But the one sentence out of that whole paper I read that I thought was very, very interesting is I'll read it to you verbatim, much of the existing and planned hydrologic infrastructure in the United States based on published rainfall design standards will continue to underperform its intended reliability due to these rainfall changes. So that big battleship map I showed you with all the red boxes, that was published in 2004. And they aren't going to publish a new one anytime soon that I've heard about. So since 2004, at least here in Middle Tennessee, we've had several very intense flooding events that are not reflected in the development of that chart. Cities in Virginia and Florida have gone ahead and said, we're seeing rainfall event after rainfall event, and they've hired folks to do their own rainfall studies or done them themselves. I love this quote from the newspaper there in Virginia Beach, where the city engineer had previously worked for a consultant like me, and he said, you did what you needed to meet the requirements, so you used Atlas 14 like everybody else does, because you were trying to keep your clients' costs to a minimum. Why build anything that's up and above what the design requirements are? I get it. Absolutely not. But when they looked at their rainfall data, they found that 100-year storms were happening 2 to 3 times as often as the atlas that we all use would suggest. So if I had the full hour-long version of this, I would take you through the analysis that I've done for Knoxville, Memphis, and Nashville, but we'll talk about that later, because we need to talk about flooding. Enough about rainfall, right? Because we all know when rainfall falls, something happens when it hits. We're very good here in the state of Tennessee about water quality, right? So the first inch when it hits the ground, there's oil, there's sediment, there's all this stuff that immediately gets washed off, and that's what we focus all of our permitting and design requirements on, is trying to get that stuff out of the streams. We have to do that too. It's very important. But beyond that 1 inch, you run into a little bit more trouble after you get that first flush gone. So as you build, there's Joni Mitchell again there in the corner. So as you build more and more development, this is intuitive to all of us. We know it. I crunched the numbers a little bit because I am a nerd. And if you put these sorts of a 10-year storm into different types of developments, you see these charts here on the right. Open land, it's nice. It's like 20 or so CFS runoff. You put a house on it more, all the way up to, you know, essentially just a bare parking lot. And that results in over a 4-fold increase in runoff on the same amount of rainfall. So a 10-year storm may in fact be creating a 40-year flood. It compounds. And in fact, it's not even that linear, because nothing's linear in science. It actually compounds in ways that are more intense than we can think about. And really, it's just these peaks. What we see with development are the increase in the peaks, right? It's not necessarily these long period, the river's up and it's, you know, the entire town is flooded. But let me tell you what, if you have 1 inch of water in your house for 15 minutes, that is 15 minutes too long. So I'll take you to my hometown of Rockledge, Florida. This city is a boom town that grew up around the development of the Kennedy Space Center on the East Coast. In the 1960s and 70s, Levitt Park was built with the design standards at the time. There are canals all around it, so they built these big pipes to shuttle everything to the canals that eventually went out to the west there, to the St. Johns River, and none of these other things existed when they built that. But they were already having problems with it by the 1990s when they permitted these developments, Pelican Harbor and Sable Groves. So you can see they have some retention ponds there to try to treat some of the runoff. But even when those get full, they go to the same ditch out behind there and out to the river. So those two go in, more and more development comes in. By 2006, on the city's dime, they had to build a regional detention pond where the soccer fields used to be right there. It's great, it's got a jogging track around it, but they realized that something had to be done about it, and that was their solution. They hired a consultant to look at it, and that's how much they needed to detain. And you can tell what they built in 2009 and 2010 looked a lot different after they were on the hook for a regional detention pond. So design standards can change. And at least in Florida, and when I work with the Army Corps of Engineers, they use this terminology too. They use what's called no adverse impacts. The Army Corps of Engineers actually calls it no adverse off-site impacts. And the idea is to protect cities, municipalities, counties from the potential of lawsuits based on, I hate to say negligence, but there's a lot of different classifications of what they consider to be negligence, that they didn't identify the impacts of development activities, they didn't require appropriate and necessary mitigation measures. I don't know that I've necessarily seen this in Tennessee, but it absolutely happens that eventually if a problem is repetitive and it goes on enough and the right people are listening and are approaching it from a legal standpoint, it's possible where governments have been held liable. Because for every column A, you know, you get a really nice looking development there. A couple of ponds, there's buffers there. Some of you might even live in this development that is in Franklin. And then there, we have ones on the right that look like this. We see a lot of these on the right. That, you know, a lot of the stuff that was built in the mid-20th century just had parking lots, and there's just a big pipe that fires off everything that rains on it to the river. And we're not going to do a lot about that. We're dragging the 20th century's architecture along with us no matter where we go. And we are the sum of our mistakes and our successes. So I'm kind of in this presentation with some rhetorical questions about what we want to think about as we think about our design and planning roles in our communities. Is it fair to ask new development to pay for what was designed with different standards? And that's private and public. That's the roads we build, that's the publics we build. You know, is it? Is it fair for the burden to fall on the taxpayers of the community to then have to pay for the mitigation for stuff that we've been sitting on for a long time? This Technicolor image right here is I-40 through Memphis, right? It used to be Gayoso Bayou. It was a low, swampy area that eventually flowed out to Wolf Harbor into the Mississippi River. But when they built I-40 through, they built these big, they almost looked like Kit Kat bars, these enormous Kit Kat bars straight across the bayou. They dished and channelized the bayou through those swales and box culverts there. And now they have flooding issues. So no matter what happens, though, stormwater utility fees are equitable by design. We have that in our pocket. You know, if a used car lot pays more for use than I do at my house, just like Bridgestone Arena has a lot higher power bill than I do at my house. It's a simple use-based fee. And design standards can and should be reassessed. We need to look at what's going on around us and study them and not just lean on the book, so to speak. And this one's in here for me. I love this one. Solutions derived from planning should be conscientious of funding limitations, because as an engineer, I can tell you, oh, we can fix every one of those flooding issues in every part of the city. It'll be $90 billion. No, you're gonna laugh. You're all gonna laugh. And finally, we wrap up with that one takeaway I wanted to give you at the beginning. Citizens should understand that they're subject to a risk calculation being made by everyone, but especially corporations, politicians, and interests. I'm an interest. You're an interest. Everybody in here is an interest, and we're all making risk assessments and calculations based on what we should do about the problems in our community and the successes in our community. We need to think about it, because if our context for flooding is the 1979 flood there in Antioch, oh, I don't know. I have to look at 2010 and see how it turned out. There's my contact info.
Great, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Amy.
So-
We now have this. We now have this on our.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that, like I said before, that was usually an hour, and there's a lot more in there, but boy, I'm trying to get it to y'all.
You can also, I'll tell you this, you can also go on YouTube and watch the presentation that Aaron did to the Stormwater Association.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
A
it
month
is.
or so ago. So you can see the full presentation with his narration of the slides as well, so.
Yeah, there's some stuff about FEMA that I really wanted to talk about, but
Yeah.
no time. Yep.
So I'd encourage you to do that. We do have a few minutes for some questions, if anybody has questions for Aaron. Commissioner Allen, do you have any questions?
Come back to me. I shut down my brain because of that. Come back to me, please.
Commissioner
I
Franks.
did have one,
Are
too.
you a private engineer, or do you work for the government, or
I work for CDM Smith, so yes, we're a private consulting firm. Yep.
local?
Yeah, in Nashville, yeah. So actually, I've been an on-call consultant with the city of Franklin for 5 years. I was actually at the Public Works office. We had a meeting right before we came here. So, yep.
And so are you aware of all of our proposed development along the Harpeth River?
So yeah, we are the on-call consultant for the sanitary sewer. So yeah, we built what's called the capacity tool. So your Public Works employees use a tool that we help them out with to assess sewer capacity based on proposed and existing developments. So to some extent, yeah, I do know about some of the like Berry Farms, that kind of stuff I know about. But
So,
You think about
from a scale of
Brownland.
1 to 10, where do we rank? 10 being the best managing town.
I actually have to give your staff Jeff Willoughby sitting right over there. He and his staff do a really good job. I'm not gonna lie to you. In the state of Tennessee, Franklin is really doing a great job. I will not lie to you. Brittany Perez, Bristol Snyder, all those folks that work for the Stormwater Department do a very good job day in, day out. They present at conference. They use cutting edge tools. Yeah.
Bring it back on real quick.
Commissioner Harrison?
No comments. Thank you for the
Commissioner
presentation.
McLemore?
No comments.
Commissioner Mann?
I don't have any comments, but thank you for the presentation.
Commissioner Orr?
None.
Alderman Peterson?
Well, of course, there's much of this that I really like, especially that numbers, page number 7, where you talked about the chance, the 36% chance of not being a 25-year storm in the 25-year period. I have used that idea a lot. I'm a math teacher.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, but
It's okay if you're not.
I'm telling you, though, that is different from thinking that it's going to happen once every 100 years or something like that.
Mhm.
And another thing that you might not have noted, back in 2010, we had a great deal of rainfall here in Franklin, but we didn't have it, upstream from us. And so downstream from Franklin, Nashville got the bad stuff. I mean, we got a lot of rain, but we did not get the flood that those people did further downstream. So it does make a difference where
Right.
it rains also. But anyway, I needless to say, I liked a lot of what you had in there, and I'm glad to have a copy of it now. Thank you.
And I skipped over myself.
Yeah, well,
My
yeah.
brain's back on.
What's that?
My brain is back on.
Your brain's back
Okay,
on?
okay.
Okay.
I have a question about that. You're talking about, I think it's called Atlas 14.
That's
you're
right.
Yeah.
saying. So when is the powers that be, when are they gonna update that? Because this is serious, so I was very concerned about that. We're just planning on, what's the plan for that? That's very
It's very
serious.
interesting. It's published by the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Yeah,
And they publish it on a regional basis, which rolls. They have not ever published anything for the Pacific Northwest. So they're on a glacial pace to update these sorts of things. But I will say that in some places that I've worked on these things on and done the extreme value analysis, they're pretty close. Like Memphis, Atlas 14 is pretty close, but they did not have these atmospheric rivers, as Mr. Lindsay is very knowledgeable about. They have not seen that phenomenon like we have in Middle Tennessee. It's so spatially variable, like I said. Now Knoxville, they have actually seen a sustained amount of more rainfall every single year. They now see up to 7 inches more than they used to see in the 1940s and 50s.
Right.
All right.
And I do a presentation on atmospheric rivers, and the 2010 flood and also the March 2021 event were both caused by atmospheric rivers, which are storm systems that are generated in the eastern Pacific and come across Central America, and they dump vast quantities of water in, which is what caused us. One other statistic, Ann, relative to a 100-year storm, there's a statistic that says that in a course of a 30-year mortgage, there's a 1 in 4 chance that you will experience a 100-year event on your home if you live in the floodplain. So, Alderman Berger.
I think I'm gonna pass. I've got
Okay.
a couple of comments and questions, but I'm gonna hold.
Alderman Speedy.
So my question, when you're showing those developments, obviously throughout the years, there was additional retention pool ponds required. Is the standard, and I don't know if maybe from our standard, is that it keeps equal, or that there is an improvement when that development happens? For example, we've been presented with a development that is going to provide additional floodplain storage. How do we evaluate that? Development is that a plus plus? Is that a plus or minus? What are we not hearing?
Yeah, it needs to, so it typically should be the amount into the site or onto the site should be, that's coming off of the site should be equal or less.
Yes.
Now, who reviews that? Gosh, I've been on retainer to other cities that I will not name, that they did not have the staffing available to adequately review the developments. And I've, as a consultant, have done it. I've looked at all kinds of models. You want to build a bank, they need to demonstrate that the bank has the capacity to keep X amount of water on site that they have called out in their design standards. Some cities have dozens of people working on those types of applications, and some folks, they really have a tough time with it. But ideally, everything that you do, I'm an Eagle Scout, leave no trace. I would think
That's
that
right.
at least from a morality or from a development standpoint, that it should be leave no trace, that there should not be an increase in runoff off-site.
So if
It's
we
hard to
hear-
demonstrate
if
that.
we hear there's additional storage, are we
Yeah.
not hearing that there's additional runoff maybe from the new development?
I think,
He's right.
well, I may jump in there too, because you're talking about floodplain storage specifically, so.
Yes, that's right.
Right, so
Yes.
our requirements are, it's 1.5 to 1. If you add fill in the floodplain, you've got to do 150% of that must be removed. So the idea there, and that's a local requirement, not, FEMA doesn't require that, state doesn't require that, that's just City of Franklin. So therefore, you're kind of catching up for some of those older developments that maybe didn't have to have that requirement on, or had some illegal fill that was placed, way back in the day when maybe there wasn't even a regulation in place. So the idea there is to kind of catch up over time as the floodplain's impacted.
So do we ever, again, I'm trying to understand, if any new development comes in, do we know that that's gonna create so many million gallons of runoff?
So any new development should be the exact same runoff that was there before. Any dirt has been moved, any pavement's been put down. So that's what the big detention ponds are for. And the regs we have now are very stringent about that. So we have to detain a certain amount of flow. Now, 200-year events, that's not captured in any regulation anywhere. So those are the anomalies that we.
We've seen of additional floodplain storage, do you think of that as just huge detention ponds, essentially?
That's more in the channel for the stream, or, I guess the overflow of the channel. So that's not really detaining water. It's more like just more room for the water to go that's not impacting the structure. It's really the idea. And it's all to be done on that development's property. It can't be done somewhere else typically. So you're just creating more storage.
That's separate from that property.
Right.
Okay, Alderman Martin.
I didn't have a comment. Thank you for your presentation. You
Great.
did tell us some things we didn't know.
Yeah. It rains a lot? Yeah. Oh, yeah, really?
And Mayor Moore.
Great presentation, high energy. Maybe we could use this for our utility training.
Yes.
Just one quick, I guess that's already on. So back off of Scott's comments, that's sort of what I was thinking, but if we are required, Jimmy, to improve, developments are required to improve 150% in the area that they're developing, it seems logical to me that if, and I think we're all thinking of a certain development, or two in town, that they would fix this, runoff, or improve the area 150%. So what does that mean when they say they're gonna improve it 150%? And are they keeping, as you said, the same, is it water coming off the site is equal or less? So, let's just talk about this Brownlee. They
No,
were
we've got
talking
a
about
meeting.
this 100%. We have another 2 projects that we're talking about as well. And we look at that and say, well, what does that 150% do for that? And as I've traveled that land over there, I think you have to have other things in play here. When you have a big piece of property and you've got, like a horse farm, you've got tons of manure that if it rains, it runs off into our lakes and our streams and our river. So we have that issue. And then we have stuff stored on there. And then you have mounds of stuff where water has to go around. So if they level that out, take those mounds, or it's artificial mounds, I think it's manure, or whatever they have, in the junkyards and stuff, and they take all that out of there, and they work the land and improve it 150%, is that not a good thing? Because does that not help mitigate the water going off of the property and retaining it and letting it off at a different rate and things? I would think logically that says to me, that's a good thing.
But-
Why wouldn't I want that? So I'm trying to, not being an engineer and not doing that, but I'm listening to all this stuff and I'm saying, what am I missing here? That I don't.
I think
There's a lot more to it.
I
There's a
think
lot
there's-
more to it.
and there's two
As an engineer, I want to know how those things I just mentioned play out.
So discussing, okay, Jimmy.
Yeah, real quick.
We're real quick.
Yeah, I
real
think
quick,
we've
'cause
got-
we're way past.
Yeah, we've got,
I think this is important because.
Well, it is, but,
Yeah,
These are the outstanding
yeah,
questions
we're not,
that I didn't really want to get into tonight because it's very involved.
I think we've got two different things. So if you impact the floodplain, you've got to do the extra 150% cut to provide more storage. And that's really, you're looking at the floodplain as a whole, the region. And then there's the site-specific detention ponds that captures the rain that hits that site. So that has to be equal what it was before you were there. And there are benefits to having that additional storage. But again, you're talking about a very large, for instance, the Harpeth River. It's a very dynamic river. And ultimately, the model has to show that everything works, right? So you have a hydrologic and hydraulic study that's done, and FEMA will not allow you to have a rise off of your property. So those are the requirements that we're kind of working within here.
So Aaron, is there another thought you had on that?
No, Jimmy was absolutely correct in that there are actually two separate sorts of attacks, right? So everybody has to do the capture on their site. You build a home, the rain strikes it, you have to capture that. But if you build outside the floodplain, if you build somewhere that is completely high and dry, correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, you don't have to do that sort of mitigation. Because we're talking about where you might impact something that's within FEMA. If you're in Zone X, you don't necessarily need to do that.
Right, it's only when you impact the 100-year floodplain that's mapped today.
Yeah. So you might, many developments wouldn't need to do that. And I think what we usually see in cities is that those are the places developed first, and then as time goes on, you get into these places where mitigation is necessary, and people have either skipped it, or they're just left holding the bag.
And it's very interesting in your presentation, I'll make one comment, and that's it, but it was very interesting in your presentation that, are they responsible to fix all the problems that came before them? You know, the roads and all that stuff, the flooding on the roads and the other stuff in the other communities, not just the impact of their property and what you said, water coming in has to be equal or less, but are they responsible to fix all the problems that came before them? I don't buy that, but there's.
Yeah, that's right. I don't necessarily, it's rhetoric.
Okay,
Okay.
we are adjourned.